Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
My name is Clay Newcomb, and I'm the host of the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast. I'll also be your host into the world of hunting the icon of North American wilderness, the bear. We'll talk about tactics, gear, conservation, but we'll also bring you into some of the wildest country on the planet chasing bear. This week, we're going back to one of our classic Bear Hunting Magazine episodes, our episode that we did with Ed Vance at his home in California. Ed Vance is a longtime houndsman, hunting both bear and mountain lion, and Ed wrote a book called By A Hound Dog. I knew nothing of him. I read his book and I thought, I got to meet this guy. And so I went to California and I met Ed Vance. He's been a friend of mine ever since. This podcast will go down as one of our classic episodes. If you haven't heard it, for those of you that are new to the podcast, I know you're going to enjoy it. And if you've already heard it, then you can check it out again. This podcast is brought to you by our friends at W Hunting Supply. These guys are your go-to source for all things hounds. And that's why it's pertinent that they're on this podcast, as they are on most of our podcasts. But W Hunting Supply is going to be your source for any kind of dog-related stuff. They've got the new Garmin Alpha 200i, which is Garmin's new product. It has an inReach built into the dog tracking system. A bunch of new features. Garmin's first new dog tracking product in 8 years. If you're going to buy one of these, buy it from our friends at DU Hunting Supply. CVA muzzleloaders. I've been carrying the CVA muzzleloader even though it's been the Arkansas rifle season, and I'll tell you exactly why I did it. I was tree stand hunting, thick vegetation. I wanted a light, short, compact gun because I was getting in deep. I knew I wasn't going to get 2 shots at an animal, so I carried my CVA Acura mountain rifle muzzleloader because it was light, it was easy to handle in the tree, and I had 100% confidence in its ignition power. I knew it was going to shoot, and it was even raining hard while I was hunting. So CVA muzzleloaders, incredible muzzleloaders, incredible diversity of muzzleloaders, going from super long range, high-end stuff down to kind of more price point type muzzleloaders. Great company, great guarantee on all CVA products. Check them out. If you know a bear baiter, get him some Northwoods bear products for Christmas. Best commercial bear scents on the market. We've been using them for years. If you're baiting bears, it makes no sense to not be using commercial scents. Check out our buddies at Northwoods Bear Products. And lastly, Western Bear Foundation. These guys are a nonprofit hunting conservation organization doing incredible work out west for bears, fighting the good fight for predator hunters. For those of us that understand that natural systems in today's ecological environment must be managed. And and large predators must be managed. And large predators can be utilized for their commodities in incredible ways. And what I'm talking about is eating them, using their hide, while our enjoyment of hunting being a part of a scientific management plan that fits in for all species, for elk, for deer. You know, these predators have to be managed. Western Bear Foundation is preaching that message in an area that needs it. Check our friends out, and you're going to enjoy this podcast with Ed Vance. The Greenhorn Mountains of Southern California look like a steep, rolling savanna of grass and trees, many of which are some type of small oak. The mountains go up over 7,000 feet, many as steep as a cow's face.
From this property, I caught lions and bears all over everything. All of the stuff that you can see.
Ed points to a bear hide hanging on the wall of his home.
That was one of the toughest bears that I'd ever got my dogs after. I mean, I'd had others that were just as bad, because there's right here I'm going to explain to you, and I'm going to show you where it started, where it went to, and where it ended.
Yeah.
From right here at this house.
Ed Vance is 78 years old, and he hunted these mountains for lions and bear in a 25-year stretch from the 1960s through the 1980s. Today, he can see much of his favorite hunting ground from the incredible view from his home.
But I want to show you, we're going to walk over here. We'll have to walk around a little bit in order for you to take in all of what I'm going to show you, because
Ed is a gifted craftsman with wood, brick, and stone. His home he built himself. It's a mix of a timber-framed, bungalow-style, western log cabin, ornate with saddles, worn cowboy hats, bear hides, and a mounted mountain lion, killed before the hunting ban in California. It's clear to see that Ed is a meticulous master of everything that he takes on. And at one period in his life, his entire focus was hunting lions and bears with hounds.
This particular bear that I got out after, it was mentioned in the book. I started him in October, and it was just at the crack of dawn. And I couldn't find a bear by driving roads, so I had two hunters with me. And so we stopped, and I says, I'm going to walk up a canyon and see if I can get a bear started up there, and I'm going to show you where this is at. You see this ridge right in front of us, so you can see a lone tree standing up there all by itself. Yeah. From that tree, if you went straight down into the canyon, so you can see the ridge on the other side. Yeah. Straight down into the bottom, that's where they started this bear. I went up there, and they struck this bear. And this ridge, you can see where that lone tree's standing. You can see the ridge that it's on. And that ridge follows and keeps going, and then he gets right up to a point. They pulled him out of that canyon. He came out of that canyon, crossed onto this side of that ridge, and he skirted that ridge almost on the top, all the way around. And then where you can see that one high point, he turned and he went to the opposite side of it. Now, there was no roads to speak of, and so I was following him on foot. By the time I got to there, I could hear those dogs. It was a place called Portuguese Pass, and Portuguese Pass is the furthest ridge that you can see.
Yeah, I see over there.
As far as you can see. And he's just about to go over, and I thought if he goes over that...
So there's a big valley in between that.
It's called Bull Run Basin.
Portuguese.
The other side is called Bull Run Basin. I was north of that high point that we're talking about, which is from right where that point is at to where it started. Yeah, it's only like maybe 3 miles through the air, but we weren't going through the air. We were going on ground, and it's different. It's different. Yeah. So I got around to the other side of that, and I heard those dogs headed towards Portuguese Pass. I had 5 dogs on it, as I recall, and they were really hammering that thing. And I was suspicious of what bear this was, because I didn't know at the time, but I'd caught him 2 other times and let him go. and he was a non-treeable bear. You're going to bay him up. That was it. So as far as you can see, he just about got over that far ridge, and he was moving. And these dogs were hitting it as hard as they could, and that is like extremely steep and rough.
Yeah.
And then I lost hearing of him. Now we're going to have to walk to another spot over here, and I'm going to show you where this thing ended up at. In the meantime, I had these two guys I had them here on a bear hunt, and they were waiting for me at my pickup. I had a CB radio in the pickup. I'll walk up on this little knob here a little bit, and I can show you a little bit further. Get right up there in that opening.
It's
kind of nice.
Incredible view.
It is. It's kind of nice to be living in a spot where I can take and look at places like this and say, well, I know what had happened because I was there and it did happen.
Yeah.
Now, we look straight ahead of us and we can see a rounded mountain, and on this side has been burned. And I mentioned to you that at the transition between the trees that had been burned, which were lower as the ones above, those dogs were on that side. You keep in mind, they started over here.
Yeah.
They went around that point. And when they did that, I lost them. I had no idea where they were.
Now, where were you?
I was
still back over here?
I was up on this.
Wow, so you're miles from where you started.
Oh, yeah. Swoops down. Portuguese Pass is in there. I was up in that area someplace, and I could hear my dogs going down on that hillside, which is several miles from there to, and I could hear them for several miles, and then they disappeared. So I came down through all of that, and it was late in the afternoon. Now, keep in mind, this started at about 6 in the morning. Late in the afternoon, which would be about, I'm going to say about 3 o'clock, I crossed this road right here, the road that I'm living on.
Wow.
But I was about 4 miles up.
When Ed got to the road, he cranked on the CB radio and heard the voice of a good friend that he didn't even know was in the
And
area.
he asked me, he says, let me come and get you. And I says, have you heard my dogs? And he said, yes. Your dogs, the last I heard him, he said, your dogs are down on White River by the campground. Now I'm going to show you where the White River campground is at. He wanted to come and pick me up, and I says, no, I want to just go across the country. I'm just going to keep, it's all downhill, and I can travel pretty fast going downhill. And as long as I know that that's where they're at, and anything from Lewis.
And by this time, you've already traveled 12, 14 miles on foot.
Close to that through the air.
Well, through air miles. And so you're going down in these steep valleys and ravines and up mountains.
Yes, because where the bear was started was at the 5,000-foot elevation, and Portuguese Pass is 7,000.
Wow.
So they almost got.
You had to lose elevation and gain it many times.
Yes, back and forth.
Wow.
The road, if you look right down the bottom of the canyon, you see a dirt road down there?
Yes.
And when I got there, those dogs, White River is about 5 miles from there to the north. And those dogs, and they were coming to the south, about halfway between that ridge that you're looking at and the bottom of the canyon, which is about 1,200 foot drop in elevation below where I was at. And he started skirting, going this way. He's going southwest. I followed that ridge, and knowing that if he gets on this side of it, I'm just going to lose those dogs because he's going to go down in nothing but private land, and I can't get into that stuff. So about halfway between these 2 points, which is going to be about a half, 3/4 of a mile, he was getting close to crossing over, and I got to where I could drop down, and I came head on onto him, and we walked right into each other. When he saw me, he spun, and I had this.
How far were the dogs behind him?
They weren't behind him. They were all right alongside of him.
Oh, they were baying him.
They're right on him.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
I got my shot at him, and I was almost at the bottom between those two ridges. In fact, there's some ranchers said they was listening to the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And I shot and killed him right there.
Wow.
So how many miles it is, I don't know. But I do know this. I had 20 minutes to get the hide off of him, and it was going to be dark. I don't have a clue how many miles that is. It has to be in straight line air miles, 15 air miles, but we're talking about starting at 5,000 foot in elevation, going up and down until you get to 7,000 foot, and then going up and down until you drop down to about 2,500 foot elevation. And that's what it took to stop that whole race.
I think that's an incredible feat for the dogs, but an incredible feat for a man.
Well, I'll tell you something.
This bear is the only bear hide that Ed still has in his home. Ed wrote an incredible book that you're going to hear about inside of this podcast that tells many of the stories and tales of his 25 years of hunting California, Utah, Nevada, and Montana with a pack of hounds. Welcome to the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast. This is going to be a really neat episode. I'm in the home of a man that's become a friend of mine today, really.
Yes.
But I feel like I know you after I read your book, but I'm in the home of Ed and Lynette Vance, and we're in Posey, California, which, Ed, I would not have known where Posey, California was until I learned that you lived here. But it's an incredible and beautiful place, just south of the Sierra Nevadas. Or we're in the southern Sierra Nevadas, is that
we are.
correct?
We're on the southern tip of the Sierra Nevadas in a mountain range known as the Greenhorn Mountains. And Sequoia National Forest and Sequoia National Monument is right on these Greenhorn Mountains. A place that a lot of people really don't know about. In fact, there's people that we've met that live in the valley, the San Joaquin Valley. They've never even gone up into these mountains, and they have no idea of what's up here.
Well, this morning we started off we were in Los Angeles. We were in Los Angeles, California.
Yeah.
Seven lane going one way, 7 lane traffic going the other. And we drove 2.5 hours, and we're 20 miles from a gas station.
You're more than that.
More than that. We're in wilderness, really.
You're 40 miles away from a gas station. The only thing that the closest little town is a town called Glenville. It's in Kern County. We're in Tulare County, and there's not much difference between the two counties, actually. But in Posey, all that we have in Posey is a post office.
For somebody who doesn't or did not know much about California, California is an incredible state for wildlife, and really has an incredibly rich history in hunting, and that's why I'm here. So Ed wrote a book called Trained by a Hound Dog. The book was released back in November, and the book is basically a collection of stories about Ed's life as a houndsman, hunting mountain lions and bears in these mountains right here where we're at. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. Is I want people to get a feel for your history in hound hunting, and in doing that, we're going to talk about the book. And we just did I didn't know Ed, wouldn't have known Ed, but several months ago, it was probably Lynette that contacted me just through Bear Hunting Magazine and said, I'd like to send you a book that my husband wrote. And I said, well, sure. And I get a lot of books, Ed. I really do. A lot of people write books, and I read a lot of books. And when I read this book, I could tell that the voice of this writer was someone special. I really did. And as I read the book, I thought, man, I'd like to meet that guy. And it just so happened that our family was coming to California And so I looked up where Posey, California was, because that's on your Trained by a Hound Dog website. And it was just a couple hours out of where we were. And so you graciously said, yeah, come on to the house, fed us lunch, and here we are. I've got my whole family here, and we're here with you. And so anyway, thank you for hosting us.
You're welcome. We're sure happy to have you here.
Yeah.
I hope that this will turn into a long-term friendship. In fact, I'm sure it will. I wanted to say something about these mountains here. During the years of the bounty for mountain lions, and a lot of people have no idea of this, there was a California state lion hunter that lived here, and his name was Howard Bilton. And I wish that I'd have known Howard. He died just about the same time that I started hunting these mountains. But had he been alive when I was doing this, that guy'd have had a hard time getting rid of me, I'm sure of that. But I was really surprised when I moved here and talked to guys that had hound dogs that there was hardly anybody other than the longtime residences that even knew that this guy even existed here. But he did. And like I say, he was a full-time lion hunter for the state of California. And I think he was, I checked his record, and in his final years as a state lion hunter, he was actually killing about 15 lions a year, which, that's quite a few actually. And there's some places, that where you have snow all the time to catch your lions, 15 lions might not sound like a whole lot to some of those people. But here it was predominantly bare ground trailing. And so you couldn't just go and roam around these hills looking for a lion track in the snow, because it just wasn't there. And so the dogs that they used had to be pretty good quality dogs. The hunters had to be totally dedicated. And that's what I found in this part of the country. I've seen some places it was pretty easy to catch lions as compared to others. When I was in Montana, it was definitely one of the easiest places because it's like it snowed almost every day. And every time that you'd find a lion track, is just about count on it wasn't very old, But that, and then the bear population in this part of the country is really good. It's far better than people would have thought it was. The entire Sierra Mountain Range has been, and the Coast Range both, have been noted forever for having a lot of bears, and a lot of large bears to go with it. And the reasons for that was basically because the winters were short, growing seasons were long, and there was either oak trees or oak brush that's covering all these hills. And those happen to produce acorns, and acorns, bears love them, and they get fat on them.
Yeah.
So it was an area that was very unique, but at the same time, a lot of people in this part of the country, they say that they use a term that Posey, California was Tulare County's best kept secret because nobody seemed to know where it was at. And in fact, even at the county seat, we've had to talk to people out of the building department, and some of them didn't even know where we were. And we're in their county. But
wow.
Anyways, no, it's a beautiful place. 4 seasons, winter's the shortest, summer's the longest, and a lot of beautiful scenery to go with it.
Yeah. Ed, give us a kind of a run through of your. Well, just let me just start off with this. When did you start hunting with hounds, and how did you get into it, and why? Because you didn't grow up in a family that had hounds. I mean, that was when I first started reading the book that caught my attention, because a lot of time, most of the time, somebody that's in hounds is introduced to it, or there's some pretty close connection to them that was able to get them in. But it's almost like you started running hounds just just of your own volition.
Yeah. I'd always, as a kid, I grew up in a suburb of a town by the name of Glendale in California. And in those days, of course, the population wasn't what it was today. And I kind of liked to act like I was hunting, and because right from our house, you just go off in the hills, they're just covered with brush. And just kind of make believe, But over time, I drifted away from that. And then I found myself working in an assembly plant for Chevrolet in Van Nuys, California. And directly across the line from me was a guy by the name of Sherwood Barrett. And he was from Georgia. And Sherwood, he was a Mormon. And he told me, he says that he left Georgia and he's on his way to Salt Lake City, and because he wanted to live there, but he had to go someplace and earn some money in the process. And so I was putting gasoline lines on these cars as they passed 50 something an hour. And so we'd get a few moments every now and then to visit. And he started telling me about chasing these hound dogs in the Okefenokee swamp in Georgia. And it really caught my interest. I mean, it really did. And
what were they hunting down there?
They were hunting coons.
Hunting coons.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so anyways, he'd tell me these stories about this, what he was doing, and it just really got my interest. And so I asked him, I said, Sherwood, where do you go to buy these dogs? And he told me, he says, you go to like Outdoor Life, they got these guys advertising them. I didn't know at the time that most of those guys were selling dogs that nobody wanted, and people like myself would buy them because I didn't know what I was buying in the first place. So anyways, I started with that. And
what was your intention? Was your intention to run lion or bear?
I like dogs, and I like the idea of hunting, and hunting with dogs sounded good.
So you would have been in your early 20s probably at this time?
I was.
Okay. You just wanted some hunting dogs.
I was like 20 years old.
Yeah.
And nobody in my family had ever even heard of it. And so I ordered a dog from him. And I got a red bone hound. And he's a nice looking dog, actually. Called him Buck. Seemed to know his name. So I got this dog. And didn't know where to go hunting. So I took off and I went up in the mountains up by Ventura, which is just covered with brush. Actually a terrible place to try and hunt dogs. And I never caught anything with them. And then I started meeting different guys that had hound dogs, and they weren't doing any good either. And so I fooled around with those different fellas and the dogs that they had and the couple dogs that I had. And eventually I learned that what these dogs were chasing was not anything that could climb a tree at all, but the guys I was hunting with, they were just fooling themselves about it, what they were after, but they were...
probably chasing deer or something.
They were chasing deer, is what they were chasing, So time went by, and next thing I knew, I was introduced to a guy out of Utah by the name of Willis Butoff, which was a very well-known government hunter, and had caught hundreds of lions, unbelievable numbers of lions. I mean, it had really caught them too as well. And so I got with him and hunted with him a few times and bought a few dogs from him. And from there, I started learning about the difference between hunting dogs and taking dogs hunting and catching stuff. And so then from there, I ended up losing a couple of these dogs to 1080 poison, which was a terrible situation. And that was in Utah. And then I ended up meeting a guy that he worked for a big farm out of Wasco, California. And he said that people told me that he had a hound that he might sell because of his age. And I got in touch with him. The guy's name's J.D. Reynolds. And he had this red tick hound that he said he would sell. And I bought him. And I couldn't believe what I had bought. I went from not catching anything to speak of to every time I put that dog's foot on the ground, he caught something. And he didn't run deer, he didn't run coyotes. And he caught bobcats and raccoons and foxes every time he hit the ground practically. And from there I started learning the difference between good dogs, mediocre dogs, and dogs that just aren't any good. And so on the book that I titled Trained by a Hound Dog, that title was really thinking about this dog, this red-tick hound, which we called Bo. And like I say, he was 6 years old when I got him. I was working as a carpenter framing houses in Thousand Oaks, California, where framing houses there as a carpenter was more like an athletic contest than it was anything else, because it was all piecework and you didn't get paid much for what you did. And if you're going to have any money at all, you're going to work like you're fighting fire from the moment you got there until it was time to go home, which I did. And I'd take and load Bo up on Friday nights, and I'd head off from Ventura, California to the Greenhorn Mountains, which is where we're at right now, and which is where Bo was actually trained. He came from Arkansas. He was a red-tick hound out of the Elbert Vaughan stock of English hounds, which eventually became the Elbert Vaughan Blue Ticks. But in those days, he was still dealing with registered English dogs, and which is the same thing, basically, just different colors. And I think that first year, I'd get off work and I'd drive all the way up here, which was 3.5 to 4 hours each way after working all week. And I think that first year I had Bowen, and I bought a plot hound. I called him Pat, and he was like 2 years old when I got him. Bo wouldn't run a lion at all. He wouldn't. I'd find a lion track that was fresh, and he wouldn't pay any attention. But Pat had been on some lions. I got Pat from Willis Butoff in Utah, and he'd been on these lions, so he was more eager to try and trail him than Bo was. Bo didn't care. And I think I caught on Friday nights and Saturday, right at 100 animals that first year. And that was driving 4 hours each way to go after putting in 5 days of slave labor type work, which it was very impressive to me. And it was basically bobcats and foxes.
So they tree these foxes in these little oak trees. They
do tree here. It's called a cross fox. And they're a lot harder to tree than the bobcats are. And but then too, in the summer months, you had to have something that was really good to be able to even trail any of it, because the trailing conditions got really poor, very dry conditions, very difficult for most hounds to be able to catch much of anything in the summer months. And but it didn't seem to make any difference. That dog would do it. And so then, anyway, that's the title of Trained by a Hound Dog, was that I was taught by a hound dog named Bo.
He taught you what a good dog was supposed to do.
Not only what he was supposed to be, but I was able to use him to take younger dogs and train them. Yeah. And the experience that I'd had prior to this, I did learn that one of the things that a hound hunter doesn't want to do with his dogs is get him in bad company. And up until I'd gotten introduced to Willis Butoff, most of the hunting that I did with anybody is all dogs in bad company. And but Bo was straight, and he was a clean dog. And from there I started having other dogs.
And you started really searching across the country.
I did.
For hounds.
I did.
Now, you would have been so you're still in your early 20s, and that's when you set out to try to get a sustainable pack of hounds?
Yeah, I was about 25 years old, I guess, when I got Bo. Maybe 26 at the most.
What year would that have been? In the 60s?
Yeah, I think I got Bo in 63 or 64. He was born in 1958. He was born in Paragould, Arkansas, and which is where Albert lived. But Albert didn't have him, but Albert owned the father to him.
And now you went and spent some time down there.
I did. Because J.D. Reynolds, this guy in Wasco that I got the dog from, he was from Paragould, and he grew up with Albert Vaughn. And J.D. told me that if I was interested in that line of dogs, it'd probably be a good idea for me to take off and go back and visit with Albert, which I did.
Yeah.
And I stayed with Albert for, I think it was about 3 months. And Albert wanted to hire me. Albert worked in a shoe factory. And so that was pretty full time for him. And he didn't have the finances or the time to be able to take in all these wild coon hunts and stuff like that. But he figured that he could make enough money to pay me something and give me room and board. And I'd stay there and I'd take his dogs to these coon hunts. And but I didn't want to do it. I just wasn't cut out for that. And I love these mountains here. And of course, Paragould, Arkansas, is just out in the flatlands. And but I did learn this. He had awfully good dogs. And he really did. There's no doubt about that. And while I was there, I was able to pick up a pup from him, which was not easy to do at the time. And I called him Sailor. And Sailor was out of a female that he called Lula II. And I did learn at that time from Albert that of his blue ticks, which he had a number of different families of them, that those that came out of the stock of dogs that was sired by a dog called Florida Curly, which was owned by a guy named Jake Size in Coffeyville, Mississippi. He got a dog named Curly, and out of that, and from there he got a female called Lula. And I learned that anything that came out of Lula was going to be pretty hard to beat, especially if it came to speed. And I took, of course, Sailor, he was out of Lula II. Albert also told me that in breeding, his experience, which he'd had a lot of it, in breeding in families of dogs, he said, to duplicate, if you're trying to duplicate a dog, he said the chances are you'll see the duplication in the grandparents before you'll see it in the parents. Meaning
so you'll see it 2 generations down?
Yes. And I could see that sometimes in breeding with these dogs, that the grandchildren would be more likely to be like the grandparents than the children would be by the parent itself. And of course, now Lula II happened to be, Lula was Sailor's grandmother. And as time went by, Sailor kept getting better and better and better. And finally he passed up Bo. Of course, Bo had a few years on him. He was getting a little old, but he still, Sailor was getting faster and faster and faster. And he died at the age of 7.5 through heartworm treatment is what took him out. In this part of the world, it seemed like with the guys that had dogs that could catch bobcats regularly or foxes, it usually would take a half an hour to get them to go up a tree anyways, under good trailing conditions. When Sailor got to where he was about 5 years old, I was done with the bobcat hunting because I was full-time guiding then, and it was just lions and bears, and I didn't have a need or an interest for chasing bobcats. But I would still have to hunt the dogs loose to find lions or bears, because we didn't have snow conditions to find tracks that way.
Yeah.
And
So they'd get on a bobcat every now and then.
they'd get on a bobcat. Well, I didn't want dogs out there wearing themselves out chasing a bobcat when I'm out there trying to find a lion. And come to find out, these 30-minute, 45-minute bobcat chases started getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And the last 2 years of that dog's life, he would catch 35 to 40 bobcats a year. I don't remember. I didn't keep track of the foxes. But if any bobcat could stay on the ground 3 minutes, he was on the ground a long time after he jumped it. And most of them would be within a minute to a minute and a half. And that, and I'm not bragging, I'm just stating facts. That is how fast that dog.
And that was Sailor that you got directly from Albert Vaughn.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I ended up with a granddaughter of Sailor's who was killed at a very young age, accidental death. And this was in Montana. And it appeared as though that she had that speed as well that most dogs wouldn't have. I just couldn't find anybody that, or hunted with anybody that had dogs that could run that fast. It was just, everything was a one dog race once it was jumped. But anyways, from there, I stayed in California until we got run out of here.
Can I back up a little bit?
Yeah.
So what year, so you got interested in hounds, you got a good hound, started treeing some bobcats and foxes, and you were, by this time, your mid-20s, and then when did you start outfitting for bear and lion? Because that's what the book is primarily about. It's talking about your years as an outfitter.
Yes, so, I started advertising. Well, I'd hurt my back really bad in framing houses, and I just couldn't keep doing it. So I left Ventura and I moved to this area where we're at here. That was in 1966 when I moved here. Keep in mind, I've been hunting it for about 3-4 years.
You've been driving 4 or 5 hours.
Traveling back and forth.
Yeah.
But I moved here full time, started running some ads in the magazine, like Outdoor Life magazine. And I was so poor, I was poor as a church mouse, as the sayings go, and living in the back of my truck at the same time. But I rented an old shack, moved into that, started advertising, and I started getting some customers. And
you just had a little bitty ad in Outdoor Life that said bear and mountain lion with hounds in California.
Yep, $50 a month.
$50 a month
for a 1-column inch ad, and
wow,
which was just it was just about broke me to have to pay that advertisement, But you either paid or you didn't get any hunters, and it started to grow from there, And then I ended up having I guess people started knowing a little bit about me being here, and I knew this guy lived up at Sugarloaf Village, and he said that he knew a guy that worked for the LA Times, and he talked to him about what I was doing. And they wanted to know if they could come up here and I'd take them lion hunting, and they'd run an article in the Los Angeles Times. So, I said, well, yeah, okay, let's do it. And
this was obviously a time when it was a little more favorable to hunt lions in California.
It was what?
It was a little more favorable back then to hunt lions in California.
The bounty had been taken off. That was in 1963, and I wasn't against them taking that bounty off. I didn't think they needed to do anything like that. And the lion population, according to bounties, numbers of bounties annually, had dropped significantly. Because it's like there were years that they bountied 400 lions in a year, and now they were down to like 100 lions a year. That's for the entire state. So they really didn't need to be paying people to do this. These guys are going to do it anyways. They're just doing it for fun. So anyways, these guys came up, a guy named Dewey Lindsay, and with him was this photographer that works for he's a freelance photographer, and he worked for basically worked for National Geographic. And here I am, 25 years old, with about three hound dogs, and I got these high-powered professionals from Los Angeles come up here and want me to catch a lion. They said I only got 3 days to do it in. Well, the pressure was really on because trying to, there's one thing to catch a lion where you're just out there hunting and you run into them and you catch them as they become available. But if you're going to do this as a profession, and you got people coming in, and you're on a no catch, no pay, which I was at those days.
No catch, no pay.
No catch, no pay. If you didn't catch it, you didn't get paid anything.
Was that common back then, or is that just something that you wanted to do?
No, that was common. That was the way it was everywhere. All of them through the mountain states, everybody, no catch, no pay. You had to chauffeur these people around and pay for their food, and sometimes drive a couple hundred miles each way to an airport to pick them up and take them back. And if you didn't catch them a lion, you didn't get paid anything. So,
that's tough business.
The pressure was on, and
it made for some good outfitters, didn't it?
It separated them. It truly did.
Yeah.
And I caught him a lion on the third day. And
you're just dry ground line hunting, so you're just roaming around, free casting the dogs.
No,
now, were you on your horse at that time?
I didn't. No, I wasn't using a horse. What I'd have to do is I just had to go places where I knew that lions would frequent, and they're kind of a strange animal in that you find lions that would use certain areas, and areas like close by they wouldn't even go and bother with over there.
Wow.
And so I would go to these places where I knew that I had either caught lions already or I'd seen lions. I was really looking for some place where I could find a lion track, knowing that I hadn't already caught the thing. And so anyways, we ended up catching the lion, and they ran this story in the what's we call West Magazine of the Los Angeles Times. It's a weekend magazine. Through that ad, it generated quite a bit of business for me. And next thing I knew, I was so doggone poor. I was hurting for money so bad that I'd coast home. I'd find when I'd be driving home, I'd turn the motor off so I didn't burn the gas going downhill. But and next thing I knew that I could leave the motor running, at least to get home.
Man, you were catching so many lions you could leave the motor running when you were riding down the road.
Yeah, that's right.
Going down the hill. You made it.
Yeah. I was really getting rich. I'd like to say this too, that that was during the years that I did all this. I wouldn't trade the memories of that for anything at all. I mean, it was just something that was just really important to me, and I cherished those memories. But I'll tell you what, I was so poor. It took every penny that I made to feed those dogs, buy new ones if I needed to buy a dog, pay for gas. Trucks didn't last very long in those days. 70,000 miles on a truck that I was driving, it was, you buy one brand new, and then 70,000 miles later, it was pretty rough shape. So anyways, from there, I stayed in California, doing the line and the bear hunting. I started hunting bears in Northern California. I'd run into a guy and his two boys one day on a dead-end road down here. This is in Kern County. I just caught a lion. And there's a young guy with me. His name's Roy Stevenson. He's still a good friend. And he retired out of Kern County Fire Department. And he was with me. He was on his 16th birthday. He told me, he says he wanted to go hunting and see if maybe we could catch a lion together. And it was 1966. It was December 27th, I think. And we caught this lion, but we got a flat tire in the process of trying to stay with the dogs. And we were just about ready to leave. And we were right at the end of a dead-end road anyways. The end of the road couldn't be 500 feet away from us. And I looked down the road and there's these two boys standing there with 4 hound dogs. And I asked Roy Stevenson, I said, do you know those kids? He says, I've never seen them in my life. And there was a friendship that is still going on today. The two boys was Bobby Bridges and Gary Bridges. They lived in by Redding, and their father, Jim Bridges, who's now passed on. We hit it off really well. And so next thing I knew, I was up there taking bear hunts in Shasta County, and Jim Bridges was giving me a hand at it. And I ended up buying 3 of those dogs that were standing at the end of the road that day from Jim. And all of them wonderful dogs, outstanding dogs, to say the least. I'd say to say they were good dogs wasn't really much of a compliment. They were exceptionally good dogs. And so, like I say, Jim, of course, he passed on, unfortunately. They were all timber fallers. Jim was one of the finest men that I think I've ever known in my life. You could believe anything he said. And you can't find many of them that you can do that with. And if he said a dog was a good dog, it was a good dog. And it was a good dog by his standards. And his standards were quite a bit above what a lot of guys' standards for good dogs were. But it was just a wonderful friendship that developed. And the bears, at that time in these Greenhorn Mountains, which is where we're at, the bear population was very poor in this area. They'd had from what I understand, they'd had a drought, a severe drought in the late 1950s. And they said that the bears went clear to the San Joaquin Valley in those years. And in those years, they were using a poison called 1080 to kill ground squirrels and everything else. And 1080 is a kind of a poison that if a ground squirrel eats it and something comes along and eats the ground squirrel, it's going to kill that thing too. And I kind of think that between the drought and the widespread poisoning of ground squirrels in these mountains, that it just about wiped the bear population out for a long ways away. And it wasn't until about 1968, which would be about 10 years after that drought, that we started finding bears showing up. Bears. That was super good.
So how long did you, just to give an overview, so you started guiding in what year and ended in what year?
Okay, I started guiding in 1966, late 1970s. I quit guiding. Okay. I didn't quit hunting. I quit guiding.
Yeah.
And I was in Montana when I quit.
So you guided for about 15 years or so?
Close to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, close to it.
I know in your book you talk about, and this is one thing that intrigued me, was you hunted on horseback a lot. Was that one of your favorite ways to hunt, Ed? Was hunting on horseback with the dogs free ranging out?
I did enjoy that. It was, the easiest way to hunt dogs is to turn the dogs loose and let them run down the road in front of a pickup and you follow them in a truck.
Yeah.
Which is very common then and common today. But in lion hunting, sometimes with what I was doing, see, I couldn't catch lions at just my leisure. It didn't make any difference. If I was out there and caught a lion and I didn't have anyone with me, it didn't do me any good.
Yeah.
I didn't get paid anything, and I was full-time doing this. So I needed a paying customer to be with me, and a paying customer had to be there when I caught it.
Yeah.
I mean, I could catch the lion the day after the guy left, and it didn't do me any good because he left and he took his money with him when he left. Yeah. So during those years, I had to go wherever the lions were at, and it's like most of the hunts were like 1 week hunts, and during that week period of time, I had to come up with a lion, and if I didn't come up with a lion, I just got to pay the bill all by myself, And
did that happen very often, or did you catch most people lions?
I was running I thought a pretty high percentage, and I'm talking. I hear guys give their percentages, and sometimes you have to question whether there's any truth to that, because of weather conditions and things that can happen to you while you're hunting. But on both lion and bear hunts, I was hitting pretty close to 90%, which meant if you had a guy on a lion hunt and he's gonna give you 5 days, or like in this case with the newspaper, they gave 3. You didn't get much time to do that, so you better know where there's one at. And so to do that, I had to stay active, actively looking, even if I had nobody with me. Well, here comes the horse now. Okay, I drive roads, I look for tracks alongside the roads, walk some trails, but you can only walk so far. Then there's other areas that that are pretty decent for having lions in them. But it didn't do you any good to go way back in the backcountry if you're going to take what we used to call them dudes, take them in there to go catch a lion, because you had to get them in there too, So I would take and I'd use the horse to scout, to constantly look, see if I could find a lion. If I caught him, I'd make sure I let him go. But try and keep track of it so that you could hopefully find it again, which wasn't all that often. I seemed like I'd catch lions, let them go, and I'd never even see their tracks again.
Yeah.
They're just gone,
Yeah.
I don't know what happened.
So you weren't, I guess it's obvious, you couldn't use the horse when you had clients with you. So you were using that horse to be mobile, to find lions for when people came in.
Basically, yes, but I did use them on occasion. If, as an example, there's a place that I used the horse every time I went there, and that was up out of a place called Johnsondale. There's a trail there called the Rincon Trail. It was very good for having lions in it, but the Forest Service would lock the road getting to it, which meant that you had a 2.5 miles behind a locked gate before you could get to the Rincon Trail.
I see.
And it was all uphill getting to it, so you had to use horses to do that. And I did use horses to take guys in there. And it was almost always you could find something going on in there, lions hanging out in some place in that, but anyways, how many did I catch as compared to driving roads? I caught more driving roads. Just because you can travel faster.
It's an efficient way to hunt.
It is. You can travel much faster.
And you're looking for an actual track,
yes,
dirt track in the road.
That's right. Dusty roads. You try and find these roads where the roads are just powder in them, and that was.
Did you get where you were really good at seeing a track? I mean, yes. I know when I've hunted with these guys out in Tennessee that they're looking for tracks crossing gravel roads and places where bears skid down banks, and leaves, and they can see things a lot of people wouldn't see. They're really trained to see like that.
Yes, it's like I used to tell people. I say, I could walk right through a herd of deer and not even see any of them, because I see their tracks, but I can't look up because I'm just looking down so much that I just automatically look at the ground to see what's in the. Do
you still find yourself doing that today when you're out?
I do.
Really, you're scouring the ground
right here on our property.
Yeah.
I do. I'm just looking at the ground, see what kind of tracks we got.
Any tricks for finding lion tracks with your eyes? I mean, anything you look for? Did they cross? I'm sure they crossed in certain places, or is it just totally arbitrary where they cross?
Lions. They seem to use trails that are obvious to you. You get to the point to where you find a lion track. You're walking up a canyon. You find a lion track and it's going a certain direction. You look off in the distance and you can just about say, if this lion has gone that far, whatever that is, a mile or whatever it is, the chances are he went right through there. And you almost
could predict where he was.
Yes, you're almost always right. just by trailing so many of them, And
Would you? So you outfitted for lion and bear. What was your favorite? What was your favorite to chase with your hounds?
I love chasing bears.
Did you more than lions?
Oh, that's hard to say. I'll tell you what I liked about the lion hunt. I really did enjoy catching a lion where the dogs would start with a track that was almost nothing. Where and you had to have dogs that had good cold noses, to where you'd find a lion track in the dirt, and you point at it, and they'd stick their nose down there. They couldn't smell it, but they knew you were pointing something out, and they'd start looking. And they'd find a twig that had touched that animal's side, and they could smell it on that twig, and they'd bark. And you look at the ground where they're at, and there's that lion's track. And you start from that, and maybe 10 miles later, you're looking at the lion.
Wow.
That, to me, made it all worthwhile. That was hunting dogs. That wasn't hunting lions. That was taking dogs and seeing them at their very finest.
Yeah.
And I just loved that. I know there's lots of lions that I'd caught, people that I'd taken in the past after writing this book, they'd asked me about it, and I forgot all about it because they were what we call a pop-up,
Yeah.
You cut the track and it was fresh.
Yeah.
And the lion wasn't very far away when you.
So that was the easy one.
Those are easy. They're just pop-ups. You forget about them. But those ones where you get out after those things, then you go all day long, just working. Sometimes in the summertime where the dogs are just taking both of you. You got to find the track. You help the dog, and the dog would take the track a little ways where you couldn't find it. And next thing you know, they turn that thing into a movable track. And like I say,
that was
miles
satisfying.
later, you're looking at it. There he is in a tree.
One thing that you did, and this I noticed inside the book, was you did some incredible athletic feats in my mind following these dogs. I mean, we talked earlier at the beginning of the podcast about a hunt where you probably went 25 miles by foot in a single day in these mountains. I mean, were you a exceptional? I mean, what were you a really great athlete, Ed?
No. As a matter of fact, as an infant, I had tuberculosis. And they figured that I would never be able to do anything athletic-wise, but then I'd also learned that your lungs can repair. And apparently mine did.
Yeah.
And, I would go places that, following a hound dog, I wouldn't even think of going there. But it was because the dogs and I were doing this together. This wasn't a situation where, let me put it like this. For the numbers of lions that I caught, I let a lot of them go. Just let them go. Same with bears. I let hundreds of bears go. I mean hundreds. I don't mean 100. I don't mean 200. I mean maybe like 300. Treed bears, just let them go. One day we caught 5 bears one day in Montana, which is against the law to chase a bear in Montana, but we did it anyways. And we caught 5 bears, separate bears, not traveling together, no cubs, let every single one of them go. It was all about dog hunting. But in order for me to do this with these dogs, I had to take people along that would pay me to do it, and to do that, they had to shoot it. So we did that. But anyways, I've lost my train of thought. What was your question?
Just it being an athletic feat to do what you did, and you had tuberculosis as a kid.
I did. Now, there's a lot of times, I keep telling myself, no pain, no gain, and but if I could hear those dogs, I'm going to them. And there was one time in my entire career that my dogs treat a bear, and I didn't go to him. I started to go to him, but I had 2 guys with me. This was up in Shasta County. They treat a bear in this place called Hell's Hole. That's what the name of that canyon. And that canyon is so steep that you had to hang on to stuff as you're going downhill. Otherwise, you're going to just start sliding and you'll go all the way to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And from where we started the bear, they dropped off in a canyon that's about 1,500 feet in elevation to the bottom of straight down, and treated about 1,000 feet up the other side. And we started going down to these dogs, and I had 2 guys with me. One of them was really heavy set, and I knew that he was never going to get there. And I really wasn't too happy about going there anyways myself, but the dogs were just blowing the top out of this tree. And across the canyon from where we were standing to where those dogs were actually treeing, we could not have been 1,000 feet through the air apart from each other. But at the same time, we were about 1,000 feet in elevation down and another 1,000 feet in elevation back up.
That's a tough one.
And so I asked these guys, I said, what's going to happen if we get to the bottom? You're going to be able to get back to up to the top? Because if you can't, there's no sense going down there. And they told me, they says, we'll never make it. So I started yelling, and I fired my rifle a couple of times, and it's really surprised me. I don't remember how many dogs I had on it. I usually had about 4. I like to, during the bear season, I like to have no less than 3, and usually about 4. I'd rotate the dogs.
You could catch bears with 3, 4, 5 hounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little about my philosophy on that, and which was the same as a few other guys. But anyways, the dogs came to me, and I was totally shocked that they quit and came across that canyon. But anyways, we got out of there. You know, when it comes to numbers of dogs, Willis Butoff, he was a lion. He was a guy. He was a government hunter, but he also guided people as well. And he trapped for coyotes. He uses dogs for lions and bears, stock killing lions and bears. And he told me early on, he said, if you have 3 or 4 dogs that can't catch a bear, you don't need more. You need new ones.
Yeah.
And I found that to be true. If you got 4 dogs and they can't catch bears, you better start looking for new dogs or help for some of them. You might have now when I say 3 or 4 dogs, yes, 3 or 4, if you got 3 or 4 dogs and they can't, you need new ones. I'm talking about 3 or 4 dogs where all 3 or 4 of them are bear dogs. Yeah. Not where you've got 1 dog. There's a lot of guys got that. They have 1 dog that's good. And then the rest of them is just a bunch of dogs that just following,
Yeah.
And they catch the easy ones. But whenever they get after a bad one, pretty soon they start strung out. And you hear 1 dog, he's falling behind. Another one's falling behind. And then after a little while, you hear this 1 dog all by himself.
Yeah. And he was the one doing all the work
to begin with. Yes, he is. He's the guy doing all the work.
Yeah.
Well, that's where you need to keep him and start looking for replacements for the other ones, you know. But, good bear dogs can do the job, but they don't all make good bear dogs. When you're talking about these guys, like you said, in Tennessee, on these gravel roads, there's a method that is very popular today. Sailor was the very first dog that I had that would do this, and that's strike a bear out of the back of a truck.
Right, rigging. Yeah.
Yeah, and Sailor would, when he started doing that, the hound hunters in this part of the world, they didn't believe it. They didn't believe that a dog could do that, and but he did, and then Bo was doing it as well. But they'd strike a bear track that the bear hadn't even crossed the road, but the track would be maybe 500 feet away from the road, but they'd strike the thing, and then you let them go, and they'd end up catching the bear. But prior to those years, there was a guy up in Washington State by the name of D. Moss. I think his first name was D. He had plots, all plots. And he worked for, as I recall, Simpson Timber Company, which Simpson in those years, they had professional bear hunters killing bears on Simpson ground. Right. That's what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And what the bears would do, they would, the Douglas fir trees, they would strip the bark off of them to go for the cambium layer of the tree, and they'd kill the trees. So Simpson Timber Company, their solution was kill all the bears. And D.D. Moss was one of those guys. And I'd heard that he had dogs that would strike a bear off the box. They put them on the box, and drive the roads, and they'd start them like that. And believe me, that's a whole lot simpler than taking.
Yeah, so that was new. That was new technology back in the day.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, now that's the way a lot of these guys hunt.
I've even been told that guys have got dogs that strike lions that way.
Yeah,
they'll strike lion tracks off a truck.
Yeah,
dogs, if they learn how to do it, and they're good, smart dogs.
Yeah,
and they'll pick up on that. They start learning on their own how to do it. But back then, in the earlier years, prior to the 60s, I'd say prior to the 70s, actually, nobody had dogs that could do that stuff, except for just a few.
Yeah.
Like I said, I had a couple
guys
dogs.
Probably weren't giving them much of a chance to do it either, were they?
They what?
They probably weren't giving them much of a chance to do it. I mean, it's like if somebody knows that a dog has that capability, he's probably giving it opportunity and paying attention to it when it's on the box. And if you never did it before, you just think the dog's barking maybe, or
that's right.
You just didn't know.
Yeah.
But
I caught a lion one time just not too far from the house where we're at right now. That I mentioned it in this book, and that it's on Santa Creek Fire Road, and I found the lion's track a couple of days before on the far south end of it. Was about, I think that road's like 13, 14 miles long. And, but it was an old track, and I just worked it myself with dogs couldn't smell it. And, I got about 10 miles of it. And then
so you followed the actual tracks of the lion with your eyes for 10 miles.
And I pointed out to the dogs, if they could smell it, they'd bark. They'd try and find it, but, you're taking like some of these dogs. I'm being very honest and serious about this. You find a lion track in a dirt road, and the track was made when the road was wet in the mud, and it's not wet now. It's dry and it's hard. And you got dogs who can stick the nose down in that thing and smell that lion's track. They're smelling and responding to a track that is probably 4 days old, maybe a little older than that. Now, they can't trail it much at all. They smell it. They can't trail it, but at least they're identifying it, that I know that he was here. And you're looking there and you're seeing where they're barking, and they're sticking their nose down in the dirt track that was mud, but that is now hard, solid.
Wow, that's incredible.
And so I would take and try and work the dogs and see if we could get something out of it, Well, anyways, I got to the point that I figured I got up here to this telephone ridge, and I thought, I think I'm pretty caught up to that line pretty close, which that's about 8 miles, I guess, from where I first found it. And so I got this friend of mine, Joe Bryan, who he's another fireman, good friend, still friends. And I mentioned Joe in the book. Joe hunted with me an awful. I didn't have dogs. A terrific hand, a very good hand. Anything, horses, dogs, it didn't matter. He just tell him to do it, and he would do it. And he was very helpful. And I called him up and I said, I think I found this lion and he's on Telephone Ridge. And I says, if you want to go with me, I'd like to have you go along. I'm going to come around from the north side and drive in to the south and start looking. And that lion apparently met us in the road because we're driving down the road and the dog just exploded in the back of the truck. And this was before I had dogs who were striking bears and stuff out of the back of the truck. But they just exploded. And the road was hard. You couldn't see tracks of anything. And I said, well, whatever it was, it's fresh. And I know these dogs in the back, I know what they look for what they chase. And if whatever it is, it'll climb a tree. So let's find out. and we dumped the dogs out. And it wasn't any time at all. And they had that line up a tree, you know.
Wow. So you had trailed him with your eyes for 8 miles. You had,
yes.
And you knew which direction it was going. You came in from the other way and just caught him red hot.
I'd find his
just
track.
Popped him right up.
Yes, I'd find his track where it stepped into the road, and then you'd lose the track. You had no idea where it was at, and all you knew is that it either went below the road or above the road. So that from that point, I'd take a dog. Just one dog is going to be out there with me, and at that time it was either Sailor or Bo. And both of them is extremely good at cold trailing, and just walk the road. Don't get him excited or anything. You don't want him casting out, going a long ways from you. But start walking the road and just looking. And you see the dog over there and he's smelling of a twig and his tail starts wagging and he's checking it out more. And pretty soon he's run his nose out about a foot or a little more on a twig smelling to see what he's not too sure what he's smelling. Pretty soon they throw their head in the air and they let out a ball, and you know you're going the right direction anyways.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So from that point, you just keep going, and like I say, I was able to do that. This lion I was lucky. The lion was at 5,000 foot elevation, and that road's at 5,000 foot all the way, and it was just traveling, heading north at that same elevation, and that road just happened to be there. And so anyways, we ended up catching the thing.
Yeah. Ed, is there any part of the book that you'd like to tell people about? I mean, was there a favorite part of the book for you that just a story as we kind of start to wind down here a little bit?
Well, all the stories that I put in there happen to be kind of favorites, you know. And I guess the thing for them to do is get a copy of the book and read the thing.
Yeah.
You know, that'll tell. But, you know, there is something that I'd like to say that I haven't hunted hounds since, well, I hunted with Jim Bridges one time up in Susanville, and that was 1995. We caught a bear and let it go, of course. And but I haven't had hounds since the late 1980s. And I kind of burned myself out between myself and my dealings with politics. And politics went all the way down into fish and game departments, very political. And in some cases, you find yourself on the outside of the good old boys club. And which is something that unless you're in it, you don't like it. And I wanted no part of being in it. I got involved with the Montana Fish and Game of tagging mountain lions, and myself and a fish and game biologist up there named Jerry Brown. We got together, and Jerry made the proposal to the Fish and Game Department to start tagging lions for research, and I was all for that. And I quit guiding to do that, and I learned the bad side of politics.
Mm-hmm.
Some bad stuff goes on there. You know, when you've got Jerry Brown was a biologist. He's a good guy, really a good guy. But when you've got a biologist that's in charge of the what they call specialty animals of the state of Montana, which are grizzlies, moose, bighorn sheep, and eventually the mountain lion, I guess they've got in there. When you're conducting a study for them and you ask them, what are you doing with this information? And they tell you nothing. And then they ask you, why is it that you're not tagging more lions? And you tell them, well, we're using tranquilizers, which in the beginning days I didn't. I caught a number of lions without tranquilizers, but that was clear back in the 60s in California. When they tell you, go ahead and dart the thing anyway, I said, well, the lions up in this country, most of them are treated pretty high, and I don't want to dart a lion to watch him fall 60 feet to his death. Yeah. And they say, go ahead and do it anyways. And I asked the question, I said, what would we tag that one? And they say, well, what this is really all about is to fool the general public into believing that them as a fish and game department are doing a lot of things for the good of the animals, but down deep inside, all they're doing is trying to fool the general public. I heard that out of this state of California, and I heard that in the state of Montana, and I quit them when I was told that. I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
And so I gave it up. But Jerry Brown and I started that mountain lion tagging program in that state. It was like 1975, I think is what it was. To this day, you can't even find that study. I've looked on the internet to find out if there's any record of that particular study of lions, and I find nothing. But what I can find is where they took my information and published it, along with a map, showing every place that I was catching lions and releasing lions. And when they did that, the following year, there was standing room only in the area that I was hunting. They came as far away as Florida to hunt lions in an area that I was trying to do a study in. So this is what I got to say about to the guys with the hound dogs. Be careful who you vote for.
Yeah.
Be careful what you say. Your videos are beautiful. Don't put them on the internet. They're using them against you. What happened in California also happened in Oregon. Then it happened in Washington State. Also the panhandle of Idaho. You can't chase bears with hound dogs in the panhandle of Idaho either. The day's coming, if you're not careful, they're going to take your hunting privileges away from you. Your hound dogs
just
will be
like
pets.
they did here, and
just like here.
Just like they did here.
All you'll have is pets. That's all you'll have. And
so what do we need to do?
First off, be careful who you vote for.
Yeah.
Make sure you know who you're voting for.
Yeah.
Like I say, these videos, I can certainly understand. You know, back when I was doing this, we didn't have videos. If you had anything of moving, you had to have a movie camera.
Yeah. And you weren't taking that hunting.
And what?
You weren't going to take that hunting.
No. You had to have a movie camera with you. And in order to do that, you also had to have the knowledge of how to use that thing. Otherwise, you got nothing out of them, you know. Today, we've got handheld telephones that give you just beautiful videos. Yes, go ahead and get your videos, but keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
You put that thing on the internet. These protectionists are seeing that, and they're going to use that against you, just like they did here.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for the guys that love this sport so much. And yet at the same time, they've got shackles on them. They got a short leash put on these guys for those hound dogs. And it's a wonderful sport. It truly is. I just, like I say, I cherish my memories. But I got spoiled. I was spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
I truly was. I got to see the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I started, mountain lion was a bountied animal. Bobcats were non-protected. Some places, the bears were non-protected. You could just catch as many as you want, do whatever you wanted with them. And today, you're lucky if you don't.
Yeah.
Some places you got to get in the drawing just to be able to go hunt them.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it really is it's a wildlife management tragedy. It's a cultural tragedy, really, that what they've done in California with hounds. And I think it's important that we're here and that we're talking about this, and that you've written a book about all these things that people can no longer do. And I think people are so, well, human nature is short-sighted. Human nature thinks about today and tomorrow and not further ahead oftentimes. And currently, I think there's somewhere around 17 states where you can run big game with hounds in the United States. I believe there's 17, somewhere in that range. And whether these guys know it or not, their rights are currently being plotted against as we speak.
Yes, they are.
And so even in places where it's not as threatened, it is absolutely threatened by the current culture of the world, and specifically this country.
Yeah.
And you know what I say to people, Ed, is that we have to get a whole lot smarter. We wrote an article in By A Hound Dog magazine the other day about not posting bay up videos of hounds and social media and all this. I'm in 100% agreement with you. The one thing that I know that I can do as a houndsman is clean up my own act, if I could say it that way. I mean, some of the bad apples inside the hound hunting community that have given people a bad name by being poachers or by being this or that. And there's going to be bad characters in any sport. There's bad characters in tennis. But I think about if we're being scrutinized, then Clay Newcomb better be on his best behavior all the time. I mean, we're being scrutinized on the way we care for our dogs. We're being scrutinized on, everything. So it's like, man, I want to make sure that I'm doing everything right. And then part of what we're trying to do at By A Hound Dog magazine is that I believe that if we don't create the narrative and tell our narrative, then the bad guys are going to tell the narrative for us. And that's part of the reason I wanted to come talk to you hound hunting is an incredible sport. It's an incredible heritage that we have in this country. Our hunting culture was founded on hounds. I mean, George Washington had hounds. Teddy Roosevelt loved hound hunting. I mean, we have this rich history. And if our generation, my generation, doesn't do something different and get a whole lot smarter, a whole lot wiser, a whole lot more savvy when it comes to how we handle social media and internet and all this different stuff, we will lose it. And that's what we're saying is, hey, let's be smart. Let's not lose it. And let's tell our narrative scientific based. This is conservation based. Bears are thriving in North America. Mountain lions, where there's good habitat, are thriving. Hounds are a management tool that we use to manage these animals, and it's a beautiful and amazing thing. It really is.
I want to add something here that what we're talking about. Yeah, we've had outlaw hunters is what we kind of tabbed them, And I'd have to say that it's not all their fault. In the 25 plus years that I did this, I did this. This wasn't a hobby to me. I was in the woods. A dozen years there, I made my living from that. If I had 2 nickels to rub together, it was because somebody gave me that for taking them hunting.
Yeah.
And if they gave it to me for taking them hunting, it's because they got the animal that they were hunting for, or they didn't give me the 2 nickels,
Mm-hmm.
But over all those years, I hunted California, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, and Montana. And in all that time, which is like thousands and thousands of days, I think I only saw three game wardens 3 different times.
Is that right?
Now, the woods were left wide open for the outlaw hunter to do anything he felt like, and he did.
Mm.
He did do anything he felt like. He didn't have anything to worry about.
Mm.
Nobody's gonna catch him.
Big predators were just not on their
No.
radar.
Outside-
Do you think it's different now, Ed? I mean, I would think that it would be different.
I have no idea what they're doing.
They kind of turned a blind eye to it. Is what you're saying?
They just didn't care.
They didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But eventually, there's some people came along that did care, and they had money, and they had a lot of spare time too, and they really don't like doing what we were doing. They didn't like that idea. The same people though, have
And
turned
it was
around.
the anti-hunting community.
That's right. But yet these people also have the ability through money to take and buy legislators, to introduce bills to stop a guy with his hound dogs.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk with you, and people can find this. Why don't you tell us where people can find your book?
Okay. It's I have a website, and it's by the title of the book. You go www.trainedbyahounddog.com. You can purchase the book there, or you can go to Amazon, and you can purchase it on Amazon as well. It makes no difference where you purchase it. Amazon will cost you more money, and I mail every one of them, so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
They all come out of this house right here.
Yeah.
And so that's a place that you can go, and it'll enlighten some of you to other things we've not talked about. And I'd sure like to see a lot of these protectionists stopped. I really do. I have no interest in going hunting myself, but I never forgot how good it is to do it.
Yeah. So they can go to trainedbyhounddog.com, and this is a 200 and something page book. How many?
It's about 280.
280 pages.
There's
It's got
70 some photos.
beautiful photos, and I just want to say that I was really impressed with this book. Obviously, I wouldn't be here if I was not, but thoroughly enjoyed the writing style, the storytelling aspect of it. I felt like it had just the right amount of human story, but also hound dog story and hunting story and excitement, but also kind of this, you really got a sense of you as a young man, just kind of giving all that you had to this dream that you had to live the kind of lifestyle that you wanted to live with your hounds. And I admired your diligence and just you're starting from zero in becoming really a master houndsman over those years. And boy, there's so much I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about some of the physical endurance things that you did, chasing these dogs and staying out way after dark and, coming in after 15, 20 miles a day on foot and coming in hours after dark and cold. I mean, just some of the stuff that you did physically, I felt like was just incredible. And not a lot of people are doing that kind of stuff these days. But no, and like I said at the beginning, your voice inside the book is strong. And it's clear for me to perceive that you're a man of integrity and just I really thoroughly enjoyed the book. So I'd really encourage everybody to get it, support Ed in this book, and you'll enjoy it for sure. It's a great book, and thank you so much for having us up today.
Oh, hey, I'm glad that you're here.
Yeah,
you got a wonderful family. I'll tell you that.
Well, thank you.
This is really good.
Thank you.
I welcome the opportunity to do this, and I will tell you this, that on that book, I did the best I could to make it to where it didn't sound like a how great I am type of a book, no bragging or anything like that. I brought a lot of other individuals into the book, people from past that I never knew, but I knew about them, and I knew the true side to them. I know that not everything that gets written down is honest. I can tell you this, from my point, every single word that's in there is true. No exaggerations. And I think you'll find it interesting. There's some other hound men that you never knew, never heard about, that the way that they did things, the dogs they had. I never was colorblind. I'll tell you that. I had a saying that I would tell people when they'd ask me about different breeds of dogs, and I'd almost always tell them that I never saw a good dog that was the wrong color, and I really meant that. I mentioned brought other guys into the book. Charlie Tant, he lived like Ben Lilly, and got some photos of Charlie. I mentioned Howard Bilton. He was a California state lion hunter. I never could find anything that was ever written about Howard Bilton as a lion hunter, but Howard Bilton had to be good. I could go by his record, and I could tell that he caught too many lions to be anything less than good.
Yeah.
And but anyways, I entered a lot of that.
Was he the guy that killed 600-something lions?
Yeah,
on record for the state of California? Well,
no, Jay Bruce, he had recorded kills of 660 something. Those are not bragging stories. Those are stories that were documented. It took a set of ears off of a lion before it went down on a piece of paper. But Jay Bruce was he was the very first state lion hunter. But Charlie lived like a bag person. I mean, he didn't have a house. He just lived out there wherever he stopped. That's where he lived. But he still caught lots of lions, and he did it by walking to do it. No GPS, no four-wheel drives, no horses, none of that. He just walked. And
wow.
But so I put that in the book, and because I think it needed to be in there. And
yeah.
Hopefully, if you ever get the book, you'll read it. And if you do, I'd like to hear from you and see what you think about it.
Yeah. So if you get a book, send Ed an email and give him a review on Amazon. But well, again, my pleasure to be here, Ed. Thank you so much for having us. And we have a saying at the end of every podcast that we say. All right, or I'll say it, but I'm gonna slightly amend it for this one because we're talking about lions. But keep the wild places wild because that's where the lions live.
You bet. Okay. All right.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.